Hello, Infinity Gamers. I'm here to talk about the Mechazoid Sokorentai, which is a very favourite unit of mine. I do have it painted, not by me, by the fantastic people at Distant Veil. I like the unit profile, so what this video is going to do is dive into how I'm going to play it, some strategic options that I've seen for it, and some weaknesses that you could exploit if you find it across the table from you. So Mechazoid Sokorentai, I'm not going to go through the unit profile too much, apart from in the areas that are pertinent, because you can see that on Army Builder very easily. But I do find some things very interesting about this that when I'm building Shindenbutai lists, I think about when I'm looking at this unit. One of the first things is that it's AVA 2. And there's a fireteam option that could make it quite a juicy unit to be fielding. That unit option is the Mechazoid fireteam. In order to compose that fireteam, you need a Mechazoid Sokorentai in there in its own right, which is brilliant. Then you could use a Tanuki or a Atom Abot. But I think 2 Mechazoids is maybe the way to go when fielding this unit. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, the cost of it. In its cheapest form is 66 points, 3 SWC. So you are using maybe half your SWC cost, but you get a lot for that. You've potentially got 2 APHMGs, Panzerfaust and the Kobaru 2, Ruto. And I think that order efficiency makes these quite powerful together. Now, I don't necessarily think you should be taking 2 of the APHMG versions. I actually think that potentially 1 APHMG and 1 Spitfire multi would be the best options for this, and that's the type that I would probably be taking. And the reason for that is range bands. So when we look at the range bands of the APHMG, it's at its best between 16 and 32, which is a fantastic range band, +3 range there, but it's only got the one profile. It's only got the AP, so it is good against heavy infantry and other tags. That also falls into the Panzerfaust range, which is also +3 at 16 to 32. Panzerfaust is a really good weapon because AP and explosive. You do only have 2 of them, so you do have to use that fairly sparingly, or use it when it's appropriate. But when you've got AP burst 4, AP explosive burst 1, it's a bit of a toss-up. So I do think taking 1 APHMG is very good, but I do think that the Spitfire multi is a good option too, because the Spitfire multi gives you 3 ammo profiles that you can use. Yes, it's more expensive. That's on the 69-point version, but you've got DA, you've got AP, and you've got shock. All of those are burst 4, they're PS6. Burst 4 on the AP, shock, and then burst 1 on the DA. So I'd be using that DA probably in ARO, although in reality I'd be using the Panzerfaust in ARO, pretty much regardless of what I'm going up against. The thing about taking those as a duo, and this is because you're getting that special dice from the duo, which means that when you're using something like your Panzerfaust, whether that's in ARO or an active turn, you're rolling 2 dice, you're taking the one that hits, but you're not using the 2 disposable that we used to use in the old fireteam setup. You also have SR-1 on any BS attack from the Mechazoids. On something like a Panzerfaust, that actually makes it quite powerful, because you're looking at a PS of 6 that's down to effectively, it's basically a PS of 5 once you put in your modifiers, which is the same as the APHMG. It brings the APHMG down to a PS of 4, which is absolutely deadly on a burst 4 weapon. And then obviously on the Spitfire, where you're looking at PS6s, they come down to 5. So that SR-1 is really good when you're using your BS mode. Putting it into a duo that is named gives you that special dice on all of those attacks, which is very useful on those Panzerfaust. Your Armor 6, which does give you some durability. You are Structure 3, so that is helpful. So if you do take 1 or 2 wounds, or if you take something like a Panzerfaust, you'd hope that you could save that. It depends on what you're facing and how brave you're feeling. But I think the real weakness for the Mechazoid Sokorentai is in its hacking. While there's an ECM guided -6, they have a BTS of 6, which is fine, and a whip of 13. I think if you're going to build a list that centers on 2 Mechazoids, then it is worth taking an Evo hacker so that you can put fairy dust on them. The Pangolin and the Evo hacking device version is 14 points. And the reason for that is because while they are good at that 16 to 32 with the APHMG and the Panzerfaust, the Spitfire gives you that closer range where it's +3 from 8 inches up to 24. So if you're taking 1 of each, you've got a really good range band coverage of from 8 to 32 at +3s, which I think gives you a lot of versatility. One of the things it really wants to do, though, is get into CC. These things are a beast in CC. Obviously, CC 23, they do have martial arts level 2, which makes them very good. They have the explosive CC weapon, so they're probably going to be killing anything that they get into combat with. So I think even though you're putting a lot of points into the Mechazoid, I think you could earn its points back if it's used cleverly. You do have some smoke options within Shindenbutai with things like Yojimbo that could enable the Mechazoid to get to where it wants to go without drawing arrows from anything that doesn't have MSV. But you could also choose those engagements early if you want to. So weaknesses, I do think it's going to be relatively vulnerable to hacking. Is that a repeater near it, if you can't get fairy dust off, or even if you can, that's going to be a weakness. So if you're building your main attack piece to be 2 Sokorentais, then you potentially need some killer hacker repeaters and counter hacking available to you within this list so that you can take down that hacker and negate that repeater network if you find that you're going up against it, or you're having to shoot those repeaters out of the way. So good options here. I think running these as 2. In terms of using the Mechazoid as the lieutenant option, I would be steering clear of that personally, mostly because I would have other uses for a lieutenant. I would probably be, the only way that I would potentially be taking the Sokorentai lieutenant is I would need chain of command because I'd be using these fairly aggressively. And then I would need an NCO unit because I would want to be using that lieutenant order on something else whilst keeping my duo kind of operational so I can get them both up the table really quickly and using the tactical awareness to push these up while still having my regular orders in my main order pool. So when we look at what has NCO, you only have the Hatamoto, and that is a strong option, but I think you're going to be struggling for points if you've got 2 Sokorentais and then throwing in the NCO Hatamoto. But that's why I would be steering clear of the Lieutenant Mechazoid. And it's just because I then need a Hatamoto, and that could get quite expensive. So let's look at a list option that uses the Hatamoto NCO and the Lieutenant Mechazoid. And then let's look at a list option that just uses 2 Mechazoids. So this first list is a terrible list that I definitely don't recommend that you try, but it could be good fun. It uses the 2 Mechazoids as promised. Key elements to it, Mechazoid Sokorentai duo, as promised, with one of them being the Lieutenant, which again, I think is a terrible idea. I then had to bring in the Hatamoto NCO to use that Lieutenant order more effectively. So I've put that into a 3-person core, which is a Hatamoto NCO, a Jizumarai, and a Yamabushi FTO. That is a Bushitai fire team, which, because 2 of them have the Bushitai keyword, that means that they're special dicing. And then I have a Hari, which is the Tanuki fire team, which is actually the Seiyo fire team. That actually is a pure 3 because it's got 2 Tanukis with the Seiyo keyword and then a Yamabushi FTO with the Seiyo fire keyword. So you've got a core that has 2, a duo that has 2 with the same name, and then you have a Hari with 3 of the same name. You can obviously switch around which Hari is what, but it doesn't really matter. And then a motorized Yojimbo, Sacha, and the Pangolin. So the Pangolin so that you can fairy dust the tags to give them -3 firewall, to give them a bit more protection. Motorized Yojimbo so that you have some impetuous smoke that could cover the advance of the Mechazoids. Chain of command, so that if the Mechazoid lieutenant goes down, then the Tanuki takes the lieutenant. Got the hacker. Not ideal, because if we've got a hacker on the table that could be limiting the movement of your Mechazoids, this hacker isn't going to kill that hacker. It could help incapacitate it to a degree, but it's not going to remove it from the table. So I would have ideally liked to kill a hacker, but just for the points availability and the structures that I was going for, just didn't quite materialize for me. Such as there as a specialist, but I've also got the Yamabushi FTO. I've got both of the Yamabushis are paramedics, a little bit to help revive stuff, but also to have specialists. The Hatamoto is also a specialist operative. Both the Mechazoids obviously have their Kobaruto Hojobot that are specialists too. So we're actually chain of command as a specialist, although annoyingly you actually kind of have to disclose that. And then obviously the hackers. So not good for a mission where killing specialists is the thing, but if you've got to press buttons, at least you've got high mobility. A lot of these are 6'2", 6'4" movement. There's not a lot of orders here. You've got 8 regulars in pool 1, 2 irregulars, 2 tactical awareness, and an impetuous, which actually is a lot more than I kind of thought. Actually, I would try this list. I wouldn't expect it to do particularly well because as soon as a few things crumble, it then very quickly loses heavy firepower. The only major guns it's got is the APHMG and the Spitfire really on the Mechazoids. And then I'll be down to a plasma carbine, which is okay because at least it's armor and BTS, so it can work through most things. But otherwise would be fairly limited. And then I'm actually relying on my CC. So the Jizamurai DACC weapon would actually be helping. The Hatamoto with a monofilament CC weapon would also be very, very useful. And then Motorized Yojimbo is just brilliant with DACC. And in fact, Yamabushi's got DACC, both of them. So yeah, I've basically been relying on getting into CC to then deal with anything, which could happen, could be fun, could be not. But this doesn't use any of the stealth or the infiltration or the hidden deployment that Shindenmutai actually has. It's just going for like raw firepower. So it could be a good list for someone who's used to a raw firepower list, whether that's Morat, Pan-Oceania, and wants to try Shindenmutai but keep to the playstyle that you're used to. And obviously having 2 tags is always great fun. But let's look at another list that might do slightly better. So again, this isn't a list that I would probably take competitively, but I want to try and use 2 Mechazoids in 2 different ways to showcase to you what is possible if you've got your heart set on running 2 of them. This changes things up a little bit. So I've switched the Mechazoids so that they've got the same profiles. One's APHMG, one is Spitfire, which does mean that the points cost comes up a little bit using that Spitfire, but I want the range bands for the Spitfire and then the APHMG. The key change that I've made here is to the Lieutenant setup. So this is actually a setup I use with my Shindenmutai pretty much all the time, which is a Hatamoto Lieutenant with +1 Lieutenant order, and then the Hatamoto NCO. The reason I do that is it makes that a very powerful Harry. I can have the Jizamurai and the 2 Hatamoto. In reality, I can spend the 2 Lieutenant orders on 3 units without actually touching my regular order pool, because both of those Lieutenant's orders can be on the NCO Hatamoto. So moving those 3 units, I'm using that NCO quite aggressively using the Plasma Carbine. And then I have the 2nd Hatamoto available, and I have the Jizamurai, which is an absolute beast in close combat. So it's very powerful, very active. I've got a bit of a shell game, because most people who play against Shindenmutai not a lot know that if you're taking 2 Lieutenant orders, that's a Hatamoto Lieutenant. So there's a 50-50 chance, and it's probably not the one that I'm activating, spending my Lieutenant order. So it's very quick to understand which of the Hatamotos is the Lieutenant. So that's why you always need the backup. You always need that chain of command in place to stop yourself from going into loss of Lieutenant, which Shindenmutai doesn't really love doing. And so I've still got the Tanuki chain of command, boarding shotgun. It's just going to hide out back. It's also a very obvious chain of command, and so your opponent might ping these 2 really quickly. So it's very important that you have them well protected, at least the chain of command. So I'd recommend keeping them near the Mechazoid Sokorentais so that they're harder to get to because they've got to go through those bigger units first. So keep the Tanuki behind the Mechazoids. I then have the Motorized Yojimbo for the same sort of deal. Smoke, probably go super aggressive turn 1, set things up. So one strategic thing to bear in mind is get the Mechazoids really far up. And instead of going, now I'm kind of pinned, put them in suppressive fire. You would have to break the link, but you could use a coordinated order to do that. And you could always reform that link if you keep them within 8 inches. So get them halfway up the table in your first turn, be super aggressive, plonk them in cover, plonk them in suppressive fire. That's a really good roadblock for your opponent to have to deal with. I've kept the Motorized Yojimbo. I've then put a Ninja Killer Hacker in there. 2 reasons. Gets me that Killer Hacker so that if there is a hacker that's going to slow down my Mechazoids, this can potentially go after it, but it also has infiltration. It's got hidden deployment. It's got camouflage if you do want to deploy it and get the benefit of the order, but I'd actually probably infiltrate it, hidden deployment. And obviously because it's a killer hacker, if you are in an objective-based mission, you can use that to get that too. I've then got the A-bot just to fill up some points. That and the war core filled out my final 10 points quite nicely. Gave me a regular order. Gave me an ARO piece that can be quite annoying in the form of the war core. Plus, obviously, you can transfer that irregular order into a regular order. So this is one where I would potentially give this a run. I'd be using the Hatamoto and the Mechazoids fairly aggressively. As I said, and I don't want to labour the point here, you've got the 2 Lieutenant orders in one of your fire teams, the Hatamoto one, which you can spend to use this Hatamoto, and you haven't touched your regular order pool. Then you've got the 2 Tactical Awareness orders that you could be using on the Mechazoid duo. And again, get those moved up the table without having touched your regular order pool. So while this is light on orders, it actually only packs 8 regular orders. You can do a fairly good job of getting things moving without touching those 8. So in real terms, you've actually got 12 orders without counting the irregular orders. Because you've got your 8 regular, 2 lieutenant orders, and you've got your 2 tactical awareness orders. So it's actually incredibly order efficient, and your opponent will feel like you don't have a lot of things on the table. You shouldn't have lots of orders, but you've brought quite a lot of things that can A, be efficient, and B, use orders that only they can use, but they're in places where you want to be using them too. So I like the style of this list because it's very efficient, could be very effective. It's not too glass cannon, because if you lose your Mechazoids, you've still got Hatamoto, which can do quite a lot still. And likewise, if you lose the Hatamoto, you've still got your Mechazoid. So I think it's durable. I'm going to have fun trying this list. I'm actually going to give this a run just to see how it feels. How do you like to play Shinden Mutai? Or more specifically, how do you like to play the Mechazoid Sokorentai if you are playing Shinden Mutai? Have you faced them? What do you think of them as a unit? Do you think they're powerful? Do you think they've got potential? Or do you think they are a lot of points for what you actually get? Keen to hear your thoughts in the comments. I'll be back soon with more analysis.